Hello, and welcome to this video where we will be discussing the signs, positive, negative, or zero, for the two most important trigonometric functions for this course, sine and cosine. Now, you can put these into your calculator and figure it out as you go, but I personally believe that it's really useful to just have these understood so that you know a given angle will have a sine or a cosine that's positive or negative or zero. This comes up a lot when you're trying to convert ideas of physics into mathematical equations, or if you're trying to understand if your calculator gave you the right results, because sometimes calculators don't give you the right results for the signs of sine and cosine. Sometimes you have to sort of think about it and add it in yourself. So in order to understand this, we need to think about the Cartesian plane, where we have the usual x-axis going this way and the y-axis going this way. As usual, the positive x-axis is to the right and the positive y direction is considered to be up. So we have four quadrants that we will number 1, 2, 3, and 4, sort of going counterclockwise around the origin there. Now, just as a little bit of review, the definition of cosine is the adjacent side to the angle divided by the hypotenuse, and sine is the length of the opposite side relative to the hypotenuse. So now let's go through and check the signs, positive, negative, or zero, for the sine and cosine trigonometric functions in each of these four quadrants. We're going to start with quadrant 1, so sort of up and to the right here. For this case, you can see that the sine, the side of the little triangle that I'm making here, that is pointing up, goes in the positive y direction. So the sine of this angle will be positive, and the horizontal side, the side adjacent to the angle, is towards the positive x direction, right? So the cosine will also be positive in this first quadrant. Now, these are sort of the defaults. When you put an angle into your calculator and ask for the sine or cosine, this is generally what it's going to give you. Now let's move on to quadrant 2. So here we've got our second quadrant angle. You'll notice that we are measuring from the positive x-axis. So our quadrant 2 angle kind of goes like this. That's how we would measure it. For this case, the side opposite, if we're forming our little triangle here, right? You can see we're forming a little triangle. The opposite side goes towards the positive y-axis, so the sine is positive, and the adjacent side is towards the negative x-axis, so the cosine is negative for this quadrant. Down in quadrant number 3, again, we're still measuring our angles relative to the positive x-axis, so we kind of go all the way around here. In this case, the sine, the opposite side, is towards the negative y, so the sine is negative, and the cosine is also towards the negative x, so they're both negative in this quadrant. Finally, we've got quadrant 4, where we've gone almost all the way around. Here, the sine is still pointing kind of downish, so the sine is negative, and the cosine, in this case, is towards the positive x-axis, so the cosine is positive. So that's your basics for the four main angles, right? In quadrant 1, they're both positive. In quadrant 2, the sine is positive, the cosine is negative. In quadrant 3, both are negative. And in quadrant 4, the sine is negative and the cosine is positive. Now let's go through four special angles, because it's also useful, I think, to just know and understand where these come from and be able to visualize them. We're going to start with an angle of 0 degrees, or equivalent 360 degrees. In this case, we see that there is no opposite to the angle. right? The angle would just be kind of along this side. There is no opposite to it, so the sine is 0 and the cosine is 1, because however long that adjacent side is, it's going to be equal to the hypotenuse. So adjacent over hypotenuse is going to be 1, because they're both the same number. Whatever that number is, they're going to be the same. Next, let's move to 90 degrees. And in this case, we sort of have the reverse. There is an opposite to the angle, but no adjacent to the angle. So my angle's like this. There's no adjacent part like this. That doesn't exist. So we can conclude that cosine has to be 0, but there isn't an opposite side to my angle. So the sine is going to be positive 1. Going all the way over to 180, we're back in sort of the first situation where we have no opposite, but a bunch, it's all adjacent. So the sine is back to 0. The cosine is -1 here because it's all pointing to the negative x side. Finally, we go around to 270, where this is similar to the 90-degree part, where there is no adjacent, but there is an opposite. So no adjacent means that the cosine is going to be 0, but the sine is going to be negative because it's pointing down. So that is the summary of what I hope you'll know about sine and cosine for everything. So you've got the 4 main quadrants where you should know where sine and cosine are positive and negative. And then there's 4 special angles that are multiples of 90, 0, 90, 180, and 270, where you can know that one of them is 0 and the other is ±1. This concludes this video.